This is new material that's just been coming out. Some of it has only come out in the last year. Almost every year, we're now updating this new material. This is absolutely, it's made my job an awful lot easier. In 33 years of working with Muslims, we never had what we're going to show you this afternoon. Some of it we introduced last year. For those of you, how many were here last year when we introduced some of this material on the Quran? We're going to go one step further, and we're going to show you not only what we're finding out about Muhammad, but what we're finding out about how Islam actually began and what Muslims have to contend with. This is material that we're using. I'm not asking any of you to use this material, okay? It's very polemical. It's very controversial. It's very confrontational. But you'll see why. So let's move right into it. And let's ask the question that Muslims are all claiming. Remember yesterday we talked about ISIS, and we noticed that every Muslim, whether they are radical, whether they are nominal, whether they are liberal, are dependent on two things. Every Muslim is dependent on the man in the book and the man, the book and the man, the book and the man, the Quran and Muhammad. Of course, beyond that, then comes everything else, false. If you can destroy the book, if you can destroy the man, you've destroyed Islam. As simple as that. And I would suggest we start from the same paradigm as Christians, do we not? We're also dependent on a bigger book, a better man. And that's why it's very important that these questions have been thrown against us. Much of what I'm going to introduce today, we're talking about historical criticism, redacted criticism, source criticism, literary criticism. All of these have been applied against our Bible and against Jesus Christ. And it decimated the church back in 1905. We have now done our homework, thanks to the British, who have stolen an awful lot of the material to put it into one place called the British Museum. We can pretty well now support much of the biblical narrative. And that's the great thing about it. We have passed this test with the Bible and with Jesus Christ. Islam is just beginning to have that done to it. And this is what we're going to introduce today. So if the book and the man is the most important thing, Muhammad and the Quran, what do we know about Muhammad? This is the classical account that you've all been told. As long as you've been going to school, this is what you're told all the time. That he was born in 570, received his revelation in 610. For the next 12 years, he received the Meccan surahs. Then he moved to to Medina in 622, called the Hijrah. He then received another 10 years of revelation from 622 to 632. Died suddenly in 632. When he dies, Abu Bakr takes over, then comes Umar after him, then comes Uthman, and then comes Ali. And that's the Rashidun era. That is the 40-year period from 624 to 661 that all Muslims want to get back to. That's what ISIS wants to get back to. That's the period known as the golden period of Islam. And that's the environment that they would like to take us back. Now, that story, and all, I'm just giving you the bare skeleton. Everything that you know from 570 up until 661, you would assume comes from people that were actually living at that time, right? You would hope it was coming from people that actually lived, certainly in that century. You would have hoped so. But here's the problem. Everything that we know about this period of time does not get written down till this period of time. Let me just put it onto one graph so you know what I'm talking about. So everything we know about how Islam began, who Muhammad was, where he was born, all the revelations and all how the Quran was put together, does not get written at all during the 7th century, doesn't get written down during the 8th century. It starts to get written down with a man named Ibn Ishaq in 765. We don't have any of his material. We're dependent on this man, Ibn Hisham. So it's not till 833 that we get the first reference, the first biography of this man named Muhammad, or how Islam began. That's 200 years after the fact. Does that bother any of you? The first time we get any of his sayings, the hadith, are not written down till this part here, Al-Bukhari, 870. That's 240 years after the fact. Does that bother you? It should bother all of you. Because none of these people were living at this time. They never were in that same century. They weren't even in Arabia. They were living in what is today Iran and Iraq. Hundreds of miles away and hundreds of years distant. And then the tafsir and the tahriq, which come after that, which would be the commentaries, they don't get written down till Al-Tabari puts them down, and that's the 10th century. So what we know that's happening in the 7th century doesn't get written down till the 9th and the 10th century, 200 to 300 years later. Now, we know that Jesus, we know pretty much quite a bit about him. We know what he did, we know what he said, because they were written down almost immediately. Within 40 to 60 years of his death, we already have the 4 Gospels. That's the Sirah of Jesus. That would be the biography of Jesus, written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's also the Hadith of Jesus, the sayings of Jesus, which would be the red letter part of the Gospels, written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We would have the commentaries, which would be the letters of Paul, written within 15 to 30 years of Christ, and 20 years of Christ's death. And then you have the Tahriq, which would be the histories of the early church, the book of Acts, written between 52 and 62 AD, within 20 to 30 years of Christ's death. So everything we know about Jesus historically, we can pretty well know that the people that wrote it either were living at that time, knew him personally, like John and Matthew knew him personally, or got it from those who did know him, got it from the eyewitnesses. Can you see the difference? When you do a comparison, all that we know about the emergence of Christianity, who Jesus was, what he did and said, comes within 50 to 60 years after Christ's death. For that of Islam, all we know about who Muhammad was, how it began, what the Quran was, and all that comes from 200 to 300 years. Now, why haven't we been told that? And you need to ask this question, because everything you're going to hear about Muhammad, just ask one simple question. Where'd you get that story from? Did it come from the time, even the century where he lived? All right, let's move on. The scholar's concerns is this. Why did it take so long to write it down? Were these people not literate? Listen, by 652, after 10 years of Muhammad's death, within 10 years of Muhammad's death, Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, and Cairo were under Arab control. You notice I'm not saying Muslim, I'm saying Arab. So the 5 great cities of the Levant all came under the Arab control. These were literate cities. By the time Abd al-Malik comes to power in 685, they've moved right across North Africa, all the way to Spain in the west, to India in the east. That whole swath of land was under their control, and has remained under their control except for Spain and Israel. It's still under their control today. Are you telling me that nobody could read or write in that whole swath of land from Spain to India? Please. Of course they could read or write. So why was this not written down? Why did nobody preserve it? If this was the greatest prophet in the history of mankind, if this is the seal of all prophets, why did they not write down his story? Why they did not write down what he said and what he did? See, that's the questions historians are refusing to ask. So we're asking it. What's more, what we do know about Muhammad, what we do know about what Islam was and where this man lived and what he did, if it's all comes to us from the 9th and 10th century, should we trust it, or should we not go back to the 7th century? Why don't we go back to that time period and ask the questions that they are? And the best men in the world and the best women in the world are doing just that.